can say that they have won the late game with their draft, and that if things are going into the late game equal, they'll win. And that's why one that plays to their current play style, just in terms of, well, we're not a super aggressive team. We don't force plays unless we're sure they're going to work, and we can just force less plays if our late game's better. And at the same time, P1, they're drafting somewhere in the middle of these couple last games. I'd rather see them commit fully to multiple tanks, frontline, backline team fighting, or completely bypass that and go 100% on early game, more like we were seeing in the first game.
Well, that's what Kobe agreed to. He decided within his own deliberation that the full-on early game aggression is what he wants to see out of P1's play style. They're going to continue to way to target down on Santorin's champion pool, though. The Sejuani still banned away. The Maokai taken away, but the double AD carry bans now fall onto Goldcoin United on this red side. The Kalista and the Caitlyn immediately banned out.
That Sejuani ban is one for me that, when you look at this series in retrospect, is it going to be one of those bans that you wonder why they ever kept banning it away? They do switch to the Orianna here. GCU had banned out the Corki last time around. We're going to have to see if that remains a priority for them. It is instead going to be the Thresh. Xpecial not going to get his hands on this one.
So the Thresh, I was going to say, that's a big priority here, and that could just open up the Corki here. Ryu, 100% win rate on the champion in this series.
That's what we're saying. How high does the priority go on this thing? You knew that once GCU banned it away on blue side that they thought it was first pick worthy, and here Phoenix1 showing that, yeah, we're going to first pick it.
But now you have the potential to take the Jarvan away, which has been very highly contested, and the Tristana, which will give something to Goldcoin United that they've been utilizing extremely well. And don't slap me because I'm smart.
Look at you doing my job, Tom. I'm going to go to the bathroom. You take this one.
All right, solo cast time. But yeah, the priority for this Tristana has flip-flopped from both of these sides, and both of them taking it very, very high value over the Caitlyn and the Kalista that have been banned away.
Yeah, it's like we said, probably the third strongest pick in the meta, maybe even higher, and as well as the fact that they just, both teams have basically been first picking it. It's highly contested. P1 are going closer back to what we saw in game one with the Varus taken away for Arrow here.
And the big question is, do they lock in a support choice and try to keep something, you know, for Zig in the later stages of the game? Or they could go with the Renekton, they could go with a Kled throughout the rest of the pick ban phase, or do they try to take something else away from, you know, the top lane pool, like something that you deny that Gnar pickup that is still technically available right now, but could not be for a very long time. But actually, the Rek'Sai is the one that gets locked in here for the side of P1, and that's a different take from MikeYeung now.
Yeah, I don't mind it though. I mean, it has really aggressive pathing early on if you use its tunnels well to find openings. She has her ultimate to go for executes and kills on level 6. Just a very scrappy early game champion that still can turn into a reasonable team fighter later. She kind of loses a lot of her power, turns into more of a knockup bot, but still a frontline target. Even though it's not going to be a huge damage threat or even a CC bot, at the very least, it is a tanky frontliner with vision check tools to contest objectives in the late game. And on the side of GCU, once again, Fly, like you said, taking that Cassiopeia, matched up fairly well versus Ryu in the mid lane on that Corki in game one. It was just that the game kind of snowballed through other means, and then eventually it was till late game that Ryu made the game-saving play. So really, it was a fine matchup for Cassio.
We see a Zyra ban being the first one taken away by Goldcoin United, so it looks like in this second ban phase, they will potentially be harping down on the support pool as the Gnar once again gets banned away from Solo. I believe that's been banned every single game except for the first, so they don't want Solo to have that synergy with the Jarvan and the Narvan combination. They definitely don't want him on one of his most comfortable champions.
Going to be very interested to see what Whyin ends up locking in here. We saw the Thresh first pick last game, and he performed beautifully on it. Had a hook onto Ryu to start off and get them their Baron situation. And then later on, that Baron situation hits another clutch hook onto Arrow. And then the last team fight, once again, hooks out Arrow. So he had a monster performance on that. I would even argue probably player of the game, all things considered, for that game in particular. I mean, we don't do player of the games over best of 5 series, but probably the largest influence in their win potentially. But now not going to have a chance to display his skill on that champion. He's going to be forced onto other champions. And as he's a pretty fresh player for most of us, we're not going to know what to expect out of him.
Right, and we don't even have anything from the regular split of the Challenger Series to kind of fall back and I'll be like, oh, well, he'll just play this. The last time we saw him was Spring Split. He subbed in while Mad Life was still having visa issues, and he played a game of Braum. That was pretty much it. So that's nothing different than what we saw from Mad Life. Then again, neither was the Thresh. But the ban away from Shen here from Phoenix1 means that we're going to see Solo on something else a little bit different this time around, and it's going to be the Renekton picked up for him, and that's kind of another kind of staple pickup for Solo in the top lane. He's been one of the players in the Challenge Series, both him and Licorice, be able to take that Renekton advantage in the top lane and snowball it down into the mid lane, utilizing his flash stun engages, which are are very improbable, but somehow work out for these guys.
Yeah, it's still a tough champion to make work in the late game with how he only has a single target lockdown. But strong in the early game, and that's something that GCU seems to be wanting to do, is pick a lot of lanes that are self-sufficient or moderately strong on their own, try and hopefully just wait out the first 15-20 minutes of the game, make a couple plays. If they find themselves with advantages somewhere, if they get a flash or something like that, then they'll force a play, but otherwise content to farm out to that late game and let their late game hyper carries of Cassiopeia and Tristana take over the game.
Well, the Braum was taken away here by Phoenix1, and they ended out with a Kled, and it looks like Whyin is going for a Janna.
All right, I was going to say, I mean, I don't know a ton about this guy, but I would assume he's not one of those vocal playmakers for his team a la Ole or Afromu, and so I'm not surprised to see him on a little bit more of a supportive role. Thresh, a champion that, while it does have a lot of playmaking, is not one where it's like, hey guys, I'm going to go flash headbutt Polv in a second, get ready. It's I landed the hook. Please hit the guy I just hooked. It's a little more telegraphed than that. And Janna is a champion that when you combine it with Tristana, has a strong laning phase. There's a lot of engage and relatively low range on the side of Phoenix1, so you'll be able to hopefully reset some of these engages that come in, like a Kled ultimate or whatnot. So the Janna pick here, not bad for the lane or for the team comp, so I like it.
Yeah, so now we have a bit more protection for Rikara's later game hyper carry Tristana on the bottom side of the map, but also pairs up extremely well, letting the Cassiopeia stay alive in some very key situations. So GCU, a bit of a different look to their overall team composition, but they still potentially have a bit of team fight prowess in themselves. They have a early game advantage they could get out of their top lane jungle synergy with Renekton and Jarvan, whereas on the flip side for Phoenix1, a bit more of a cohesive composition for themselves with a very clear front line, somebody who could dive the back line, and their two carries to rain pain down from the backside. Yeah,
Phoenix1 definitely indexed a little bit more into that team fight composition when we're talking about we want to see them either go full early game or full late game. They don't necessarily need to pick hyper scaling. You need Kog'Maw to match the Tristana. That's not necessarily the case. Varus is still a fine champion, and when you combine it with Ryu on the Corki, we will have two front-to-back team fighting team comps here.
And we saw Game 5 on the screen. The winner of this game be feeling pretty happy as they move on to tomorrow's matchup. They will be playing in the winner's match, and they will have only one more best of 5 to win out on the promotion tournament, whereas the loser will have to go against the loser of the second stream's matchup from earlier today, and will be one best of 5 away from elimination of the promotion tournament.
Welcome to Summoner's
Very important game here for both these teams. Whyin stepping up huge last game, already in a huge high-pressure situation, and performed very admirably. A lot of playmaking out of him. This time, not quite as many tools to do so on the Janna.
Well, my big question now is, what is Whyinn's type of play style? Is he the Janna that matches what Xpecial did on Lulu and goes for the early Ardent Sensor? Granted, he has the exhaust and Rikara has the heal. That probably is a no. Or does he go for the early vision control and goes for the Sightstone and keeps Rikara alive? Just basically through keeping the lane safe and sound. We'll have to wait and see to that, as Phoenix1 already getting a little bit of early and aggressive vision control down, trying to figure out where Santorin's going to start. This time around, it looks like Santorin will be starting more on his red side of the map, maybe going for those Raptors, whereas last game, both of those junglers started on their blue buffs, and we thought it was pretty odd.
Yeah, not super odd, just a little surprising, because I felt like I hadn't seen that in forever. The thing about Janna is you don't necessarily need to go for that kind of, not cheesy, but you know, off-meta support summoner choice. She with her shield, it will find plenty of chances to get her Ardent Sensor off and really buff up that Tristana's attack speed. So doesn't quite need to rely on something like the heal to give her extra opportunities. Though it is something that is very powerful, and I think should be seen a little bit more generally. I think the current summoner assignment is still fine as well.
We'll see how they assign, basically how they played this out in the later stages of the game, because we still have an entire lane phase to get through, and this is where Phoenix1 has tried to be the aggressor so far in this entire series. The Xpecial landing, Winter's Bite, and the passive is going to end up proccing, so some extra damage comes down onto Rikara, as this potentially has the wearings of game number 1 all over again. This is a very similar lane matchup, although in game 1, I believe Xpecial had Thresh instead of Braum, and there was a different Morgana instead of the Janna on the other side. Both of them have a shield on their E.
Different players, different champions. Later on in the day, not too similar overall.
Yeah, but so far, the early aggressive shove from P1 is something we've definitely seen very similarly in pretty much every single game so far.
Yep, and once again, some more early invades too. Xpecial already getting a ward down onto Santorin to track where he's going. Relatively quiet early games out of Santorin, all things considered. There's been a couple times where he brute forced around bot lane, but we haven't seen any attention mid, any attention top side at all this series. Both teams completely focused on that bot side, and on the side of P1, a lot of jungle invades as well.
Game number 3, there wasn't a lot Santorin could do because MikeYeung was up in his face pretty much the
to be
entire
fair
time
to
with
him.
Jarvan. But game number 4 and the games before that, as you mentioned, Santorin was kind of keeping check on where MikeYeung was going to be. And game number 2, when MikeYeung played Elise, Santorin was the one that was a little bit more aggressive than him on the Jarvan pickup. And now he's on the Jarvan again this game, so we'll see if he's actually going to be able to match MikeYeung and the aggressive Rek'Sai potential coming out from him. As mid laners are going to be button heads, and junglers might be doing the same thing just right above them, as everybody so far taking some very aggressive early game trades, both on sides of GCU and P1.
Once again, another Braum Q lands. Xpecial and Arrow have done a good job of harassing Rikara and Whyin out pretty early on here.
We see MikeYeung going to be unrelenting in his pressure of Santorin, wards the Krugs, does not see them whatsoever, so he assumes that they're gone, even though Santorin's hiding behind the wall. Oh, now he sees them. He's put a ward over the wall. So, mind games out of the jungle coming in, and interestingly enough, the top side of the map hasn't been something we've really seen either one of these teams really play around for any part of this series whatsoever. Both Solo and Zig have kind of quietly let themselves go throughout the lane phase and just grouped up later on.
Yeah, I mean, the most action we see around the top side is whenever the bot laners get bored and decide to flip up there, usually after a dragon take or something like that. So not much action at all, and I'm surprised not to see someone try and go for a change-up. When a series starts getting into this kind of rhythm, the first person who kind of bucks the trend and goes for something out of the ordinary can often find like pretty big rewards. We saw previously in the GCU versus E United series, the Challenger Finals, there was almost no attention mid, and then finally one game, I believe it was E United, decided to aggressively attack mid, and they were able to get monster leads out of that because it didn't feel like, you know, Fly was ready for that attention to come his way.
We'll see now. Both these junglers are putting their attention on Scuttle Crab instead. MikeYeung's going to come in and unburrow on top of that and secure it for the side of P1 as Xpecial joins up with his jungler, forces Santorin to flag and drag himself away, and MikeYeung will continue to force him out of his own jungle. By thinking to take the blast gun, but Santorin's like, that's fine, there's nothing here. I've already cleared it out. More aggression on the bottom side. There's Xpecial jumps in, says stand behind me, and puts up an unbreakable shield. But Rikara's just content to hop away from that aggression as Ryu and Fly kind of going toe-to-toe again, once again in the mid lane here. CS advantages, not all too much in the mid lane, although the bottom side of the map is once again gone in favor of P1 for these aggressive plays that they're making on the bottom side of the map. MikeYeung actually going over the wall again. Smite was used right there. Santorin secures the ground.
Smooth escape while also finishing off the Gromp there by Santorin. But yeah, very similar to what we've seen out of other games. MikeYeung early on, lots of invades, linking up with Xpecial as his bot lane has the push pressure in their favor. And they just, you know, make sure that Santorin can't actually skirmish.
Well,
as well as the fact that, generally speaking, Rek'Sai will get the better of that early on.
Don't know if they know Santorin's in this brush, though, so if they try to push up at all, Santorin could just leap on them, but GCU might be just looking for a reset of the lane here. Santorin might look like he's going for a recall, and yeah, they will not try to aggress. Instead, they were just looking to try to get this wave pushed up so they can maybe get Rikara back to safety. He's got 34 CS in his bot on his side, so almost enough to buy a BS when he goes back.
Almost, not quite though, and that means they're going to stay around this lane a little bit longer. And the CS advantage that Arrow accrued in Game 1 is starting to repeat itself here. About 20 on this wave.
Ooh, MikeYeung, though, trying to get it for a bit of a Raptor invade. Unburrows immediately onto Santorin, though. I don't know if he wanted to do that, and actually he's going to wind up being backed away from his Solo and Zig are tussling on the top side of the map. Solo popping the Dominus and just continuing to shove Zig away from the top side.
Both junglers are seen. That lets Solo know he can go aggressive there. He's able to find opportunity. And Santorin, gonna open up onto Ryu. Doesn't look like they have kill threat at all.
Flag and drag, but Ryu is just gonna stand tall and keep fighting because MikeYeung's healed up off of one of those honey fruit plants. And that forces Santorin to back away, so both these junglers trying to get something done early on. MikeYeung going for counter jungling, Santorin making his presence known in the mid lane. On the top side of the map, we saw actually the most action we've probably seen all series where Solo is bullying Zig away and maintaining a small CS advantage on that side, but not nearly as much as, well, now a 10 CS advantage in the mid lane here from Fly as he got some help from Santorin, but a 24 CS advantage for Arrow on the bot side.
And the 3-man roam attempt sent Fly's way. Intelligently plays up to the top side and is able to walk away, not having to burn any summoners. Between mid and top, still not enough to offset the deficit in that bot lane for Rikara. We'll have to see if GCU goes for a similar play that they called for in Game 1, where they flipped their bot lane up to the top side to negate some of these problems that they were having. They ended up trading relatively unfavorably in terms of the fact that P1 was able to grab first turret in the bot lane as well as the dragon, but it did stop them from... Cute try by Whyin there to stop that blue steal, but it did result in at least Rikara getting out of laning phase to the point where he was eventually able to farm up into the late game.
It did take a very long time for that to happen, though, and that was one of the reasons that, you know, we thought P1 was going to wind up winning that game 1 very quickly. They did wind up winning it, but it was 50-something minutes later when there was a backdoor coming in from Ryu. We'll see if history repeats itself that way or not, but as you mentioned, immediately we see Rikara on his first recall, picks up a BF sword and a pair of boots, rotates up towards the top side of the map. We already saw Whyin kind of making his way up there as he moved through the jungle, and this time around, though, P1 is going to respond by sending their duo lane to that top side as well.
And Ryu has picked up his first package of the game. He's been able to make some big plays with those. We'll have to see if they're able to control him a little bit better this time around.
Zig sticking around the tower, has the charge available, and the Dominus actually was popped by Solo as they're trying to brute force him away from the tower. So multiple members here from P1. As you mentioned, the package was there on Corki, so he could potentially move up here. It looks like instead GCU are just going to be content to go for a full-on lane swap as they're sending Solo back to base.
If they call this one out, GCU have been hovering up in that top side for quite a while, getting some damage down on that turret, but P1 in the same lane now. Ryu's going to have this package for just a little bit longer. And GCU are going to stay on farming in lanes, but it's another one of those games where Rikara slipping out of relevancy potentially. He's very far away from hitting his first power spike. Only a BF sword 9 minutes of the game. And already 30 CS down.
Yep, and if there's any way that game 1 did, P1 could potentially have another one of those explosive early games where they have about a 10,000 gold advantage, you know, cresting into the 30-minute mark, but still quite a ways away. That's just working off of historical context from this best of 5 series in general, but they do have some difference of champion pool in this one. Solo is on the Renekton pickup, doesn't necessarily have as powerful of a teamfight effect, but just a bit more early game effect. It's Xpecial. It's gonna find Santorin on the Jarvan. That's the flag and drag over the wall, as MikeYeung was just waiting in the wings of that one. And it seems like this one's a little bit more about lane pressure overall. We see Fly starting to push advantages against Ryu in the mid lane, gets a decent amount of trade damage down onto him. Top side, or you know, the solo lane side of the map, where Renekton now has an 87 to 65 CS advantage over the Kled. So even though it's P1 with the gold advantages, it is just specifically because of Arrow at this point in time.
Yeah, exactly. Arrow up about 700 gold over Rikara right now. There are some other gold advantages on the side of GCU, but not enough to offset that. It only results in about a 200 gold advantage for P1.
About 400, again, solo pretty much over the side of Zig, and then 100 compared to Fly and Ryu in the mid lane. MikeYeung, though, and Santorin pretty much trading just about evenly in gold. We see a trade on the bottom side of the map going slightly in favor of Zig, as now Chain of Corruption lands onto Rikara, maybe a little bit too far forward. The immediate Glacial Fissure afterwards is not going to be enough to lock him down and take him out. Santorin shows up, MikeYeung is here as well, and everybody's going to continue to try to pressure down on this top lane tower for P1.
GCU does have all summoners available, as well as that Janna ultimate to dissuade any potential dive from coming in. P1 knows there's nothing more to be had up here, and they're going to back away from that turret. I like the attempt to force out a kill there. They were not quite able to find it, but they did force GCU to kind of... oh, GCU is going to stay, actually. Not going to recall quite yet. They're still low under that turret, and they have to be careful about a repeat dive because there is so much vision control up here for P1. You see that Santorin has basically been hovering up this top side of the map for the past couple minutes to make sure that no dive happens to his bot lane.
At the same time, though, MikeYeung has kind of been shadowing him, and MikeYeung's going to be the first one that goes back as he shows up on the bottom side. There's a ward down there that Solo's put down, so immediately Santorin gets a little bit aggressive on the top side and forces away the dual lane from P1. Not a lot of damage has been dealt to that tower, just a couple of pot shots on there, though.
And this is what you hate having to do as a jungler. Run into your lane, try lane, and try and get a push advantage. But as you can see, they have a hard time even getting that. They're just trying to get any sort of recall off to get Rikara out of here.
Now we're getting a little bit more aggressive as they turn on the Whyin. He gets stunned up, and Corki now rotating up from the mid lane, lands the rockets down. The Phosphorus Bomb is there as well. Whyi's gonna have the flash, and the heal gets burned from Rikara. So they do want to getting 2 summoner spells out as soon as, guess who? Ryu shows up from mid lane.
Nice roam out of him. P1 had, like you said, backed away MikeYeung, but there was still a vulnerability up there on the top side. And Ryu's the one who's going to be able to exploit that. They finally get some summoners out of the bot lane. They finally force them completely out of the lane. And P1 is able to get some damage down onto this turret. They don't want to overstay around the top side and end up really far behind in tempo, so they're just going to take their chip damage and get out of there. and try and expand on these small incremental advantages they're getting.
Right, they weren't able to really get a lot of damage down on the tower while they were kind of pushing back and forth. The Janna shield helping out with that a lot. They're able to just finally force them back and now take a chunk out of the tower, and they may go for a rinse and repeat of this one. They may also go for a bit of a lane swap going on, as GCU was the first ones to recall, and they have been trying to keep Rikara away from Varus for as long as possible. P1 going to recall and match this, and both these dual lanes once again going to match up to some on the bottom side of the map. But while all those dual lanes are now away from the top side, MikeYeung's going to start up on Rift Herald all by himself. This one could be going over to P1.
Yeah, finally seeing the first objective taken here. While the Dragon was down the bot side, there was so much attention up top that no one tried to go down there and solo it or force it in any sort of way. As both bot lanes are flipping down to the bottom side here, GCU has been pinned up under their turrets for so long. There's no way they have any vision with that top river. MikeYeung's able to get that one away cleanly, but they hear the global cry, and that prompts GCU to go down to the bot lane.
At the same time, though, Rift Herald gets used on the top side of the map, and there's nobody over there, so MikeYeung using that one pretty much all by himself, and Solo's going to be matching that one. This tower's still pretty healthy, so I don't think a Rift Herald charge is really going to knock it down, but they have Ryu rotating from the mid lane. So Goldcorn United did finally get that Mountain Dragon, but will they defend their tower?
We'll have to see. That Rift Herald little punch on a minion, that's so funny every time I see it. Just when he clears one minion, instead of the big claw hook attack.
Giant swipe. And
yeah, he does this little punch at a minion.
Well,
That's at the turret.
Little punches at a tower. Gets a little bit angry towards Solo, but he can't hit the champions, only hits the towers. But that Rift Herald doesn't take down the tower whatsoever.
No, I think that was actually a pretty rushed usage there out of MikeYeung. I understand what he's thinking. Oh, they're all around bot lane. I just saw Renekton down there. I don't know if he's recalled yet or not. I'll just drop this in the top lane. Maybe I get first turret gold. But one, you're going to miss out on all the local gold, even if you do get first turret there. So that would have been a mistake. And then even then, you don't even get the turret. So you just drop your Rift Herald for nothing, and the enemy team got a Mountain Dragon.
The Goldcorn United technically have the advantage off of that objective trade. The gold counts are still pretty much dead even across the board, and since the Mountain Dragon is a persistent effect and the Rift Herald got you no gold, you say advantage for GCU. 15 minutes into this game, things just a couple hundred gold in P1's favor. The 142 CS to 96 CS of Arrow versus Rikara is all of that lead, but I mean, we already have some disadvantage on the top side of the map. Solo 141 compared to 106 of Zig.
It's a very complicated way to look at that CS differences, because obviously when Tristana's really far behind, she needs to get to her item to really power spike. You would say it's much worse for her to be that far behind us. Hold on, Fly gets really aggressive in the mid lane, chunks out Ryu.
You got a solo kill on him before, that was almost another one.
Almost. And at the same time, while it seems really bad to have Tristana at item advantage compared to a Kled, he will be very ineffective in these mid-game fights, which are probably going to start breaking out here pretty soon. And those are a point where your bruises in the top lane are often at their most powerful. So it's a complicated situation to say if Solo being 40 CS ahead is better or worse than Rikara being down 40 CS.
It's kind of like a flip-flopping of interesting timing windows. Because GCU, you would think they have Cassiopeia, they have Tristana, they have the better late-game scaling composition. But when you have your Renekton as one of your advantages, you kind of want to utilize that as quickly as possible before the Renekton starts falling off, and then the late-game carries can kind of start picking back up. Whereas on the side of P1, like you mentioned, Varus, a lot more of an early-game lane bully, has a lot more damage coming out from the poke, and can combine with the Corki when he has his Trinity Force power spike he's just picked up right now. So at this point in time, GCU's game plan is around Solo if they get into one of those engagements, whereas P1 is around Ryu and Arrow. The later the game goes, though, it's really going to be about like Ryu's poke and potentially Zig's engage to jump into a backline against the two late-game carries from GCU.
I think at this point, just any time a Cork hits Trinity Force power spike, you often want to avoid fighting it, especially when you have a Cassio and Tristana. So even though this game is very slow and they've fallen behind in CS deficits here on GCU's side, overall you're probably not too disappointed at it, because this game could go much worse if P1 had found some aggressive openings in the early game.
This bottom lane tower, maybe the first of the game to fall, about 17 minutes in. It's been quite some time, but Santorin has showed up just to defend. So Goldcorn United continuing to stuff the advances coming out from P1 as they continue to try to take the first tower on the map. Zig, though, has pushed up to that top side, and we see Solo trying to wrap around through the mid lane, but Ryu's already dodged out on this one, so Zig pushing up on that top side could potentially get the first tower for himself, or P1 could be making big play on the bottom side. This might be the first real action we've seen in the game. Santorin throws out the flag, but there's no drag after to try to knock up Xpecial or Arrow. Instead, they're just taking damage on the tower. Ryu on the backside, landing a couple of rockets and trying to get the poke damage through. But P1 backs away.
You thought there was potentially big action on the horizon, Tom.
I'll stick to calling out champions.
I remember when I was full of hope.
And potential. Ooh, a flash away from Fly, though. Does not want to get unburrowed upon by MikeYeung. So good, quick movement to the mid lane from the duo of the jungle mid, forces the flash and buys time for Arrow and Xpecial. They do get the first tower on the bottom side. I believe Arrow got the solo goal for that too. It's now increasing his lead even more by 1,900 over Rikara.
And this is one of those situations where P1 could find themselves in a very large gold lead very quickly here. They grab the bot turret. There's no dragon available for 130, and even then, it's just a cloud dragon. So if you decide to flip your bot lane up to the top side to secure your second turret of the game, you could end up at a 3,000 gold advantage in the next minute and a half here as you head into the post 20-minute mark.
Yep, you see Ryu taking pot shots at this mid lane. Looks like the rest of P1 might be rotating over there as Zig has been throwing away on the top tower, and a flash on Burrow on the fly. The petrifying gaze locks down to Ryu, but he's able to just flash away from the cataclysm that was locked in by Santorin. Solo joining the fray, but Renekton's huge. Look at all those low health bars on the side of P1. The Janna tornado comes out to knock them all back, but in comes Kled. The charge is there to dissuade GCU from chasing down. Solo almost picked himself up a triple kill in one fell swoop.
A nice dive out of P1 to get the first blood into Fly, but it became very precarious when that Renekton joined. Like you said, able to get a lot of AoE damage off. Arrow was in a very funny position behind the turret by himself, has to flash through to get to his team, but is just barely able to survive because Rikara was not involved in that fight at all. Multiple low health members. If Rikara could have gotten any damage, and they probably are able to finish off Arrow, but after they push in that bot side, that's why having pressure is so important in this game, because, you know, Rikara is stuck in the bot lane, farming that wave that he doesn't want to lose that guaranteed gold on, and P1's able to force play during that window.
So they're able to pick up the first blood kill, the first tower gold, and now Zig on this top side is threatening to take a second tower kill of their own. Arrow has gone back, has the Blade of the Rune King, had that in the last fight. Also goes for a very fast execution of calling, though. So that makes me kind of wonder if he's going to be content matching up against Fly at this point in time, because the Cassiopeia does have that innate sustain in her kit when she hits a poison target.
Oh, we'll have to see. I mean, last time that these two teams played off with Arrow on Varus and Fly on Cassiopeia in game 1, he kept getting abused around the mid lane when they went for a potential 1-3-1 lane setup. Maybe that Executioner's calling is all he needs to kind of be strong enough in that matchup, but they had a much larger gold lead at that point in the game.
He also went for a QSS as his second item in that game, if I recall correctly, so he cut into his damage. And this point, not maximizing it, but not harming it so much either. But it looks like the Cassiopeia now is moving up to the top side, and they're threatening to try to take this tower that Zig is now forced to defend, whereas the rest of P1, well, at least Arrow, was pushed up in that mid lane, and Ryu continued to do Ryu things on the bottom side of the map, threatening to take an inner tower on the bottom side. Yeah,
like we were saying before, the Corki much happier in a long lane than a Cassiopeia. Maybe that's why the Cassio's in the top side, because the turret's still up there. But either way, the big problem is Arrow still has so much pressure on Rikara, constantly getting shoved in, slowly chipping away at these turrets. Eventually, they're going to start dropping. P1 going to be able to grab this dragon as well.
So they utilize the pressure from Ryu bot side and Arrow mid lane, and they take themselves the Cloud Drake. Not necessarily the most combat effective dragon, but still they take that away from Gold Coin United, as they were the ones that got the first dragon of the game. And now 4 members strong are pushing up in this mid lane again. They have Solo on the bottom side, Cassiopeia's way on the top side, and actually none of them have their teleport available. It's actually locking down onto Santorin here. Glacial Fissure comes out, Xpecial charging forward, Monsoons pop, but Santorin still falls. The tower's gonna follow short after that. Whyin gets tagged by 1 Winter's Bite, but nothing else after that.
Nope, and there you see, once again, P1 just set up that siege. They chunk somebody out, they land the Varus ultimate so they get low, and then with how much long-range damage they have, they're able to finish them off. They're able to grab the turret. It also buys space for Zig up in the top side to finish off their 3rd outer turret of the game, as Fly had rotated down to potentially try and get involved in that fight.
Yeah, like you said, P1 could find themselves the recipients of a giant influx of gold, and now here it is, 4,000 gold advantage at the 22-minute mark. It's going to be able to help finish off some very key items. Now a Tiamat has been picked up for the side of Zig, so he can go into the split push against Renekton and come out ahead in the wave-shoving game. Static Shiv has been completely purchased out here by Arrow on the Varus, so it has a lot of wave clear potential, and Corki has his own as well, so there's a lot of wave clear coming out from P1. The Corki's ahead in his matchup, is ahead pretty much at this state in the game, and can continue to split push down. The Renekton has to match him, which means that now the Kled is going to be able to go toe-to-toe against the Cassiopeia.
And this is a team comp out of P1, like we were saying, that has gone much more into the team fight style of gameplay, and that was something that was a problem in game 1 was, yes, they built a really big lead with how strong their comp was in the early game, but then as soon as they started making mistakes, their comp completely falls apart. This time around, with this 5,000 gold lead they nearly have 22 minutes into the game, it is much more of a secure lead, because even if you make a mistake and GCU grabs a couple thousand gold back, you're still in a relatively strong position.
We see Rio on the top side of this little jungle invade with a package available for Corki. Now continuing to split against the Cassiopeia, so we do have a 2-level advantage now for Ryu. Over Flies, he's going to be the one taking it to the Cassiopeia, and Zig on the bottom side of the map. Level deficit compared to Solo, but still content to go toe-to-toe against the Renekton at this point in time, who has itemized for some armor early on, so he doesn't necessarily have the same kind of wave clear potential. Only has, well, in his kit he does, but he doesn't have the same kind of double AD item spike. He's gone for the Black Cleaver and then gone full tank at this point.
And it makes sense. I mean, you go against 2 crit users in both Corki and Arrow, or excuse me, the Varus, and then as well as the fact that Zig and MikeYeung are also doing physical damage, so you get to build up some resistances to all the physical damage as well as to cut into some of Corki's damage as well. So I like the item, especially because he knows, you know, he's not going to team or split push a Kled completely out of laning phase and dumpster him and smash in the side lane. He's much more concerned about how he's going to perform in the 5v5s when they start breaking out.
P1 now brute forcing into the red side jungle of GCU, putting down vision control, and more importantly, popping the Braum passive on Santorin and making him flag and drag out of there. Looks like there might be a bit of a Baron vision dance going on right now. Side of GCU, a bit starved for vision at this point in time, whereas P1 have some healthy vision control, at least around the river area by Baron. Flag and drag from Santorin is not going to land on Xpecial as he just jumps on over to MikeYeung. One more hit will pop the pass on the Santorin and lock him down. Does wind up stunning him up. There's a Janna Tornado just to dissuade any chase from P1. Instead, they're going to be content to kill the wards instead of try to go after Santorin.
Slow and steady wins the race here. P1 up 5,000 gold, and they have the late game chops to beat GCU's team comp. They have good vision control up around here. They could potentially force a Baron down eventually, but they also have Infernal coming up next, so they might want to wait.
And this actually, you would think that GCU would be the team that this kind of play style favors. Now that P1's kind of changed up the team composition, you mentioned they can kind of go toe-to-toe as they steal away a red buff, give that one over to Ryu's Corki. And now continue to send Ryu up into the top side to wave clear and force Fly to have to deal with those minions as they crash into the tower up top side. And then send Arrow back down in the mid lane and continue to keep the pressure onto GCU's side of the river.
One of the things that happened in the first game as well was GCU eventually just kind of walked forward and forced a fight after being on the back foot for so long, and then probably realized, hey, we can win these fights very easily. This time around, the opportunities GCU needs to look for, we often criticize them for being too passive and not finding the right one, just force anything. Well, in this game, you really do need to find the right opportunity, because if you engage onto Arrow and he flashes out and then you're getting CC'd by a Braum and a Kled and a Rek'Sai, you get punished a lot harder than if you flub and engage versus a Nidalee or something and they have no real lockdown CCs. So they do need to be careful in how they approach these situations, but they will eventually need to pull the trigger on something, because sooner or later, P1, you're going to have to stop seeding objectives. You can't give up your entire base and another Baron and things like that.
You also don't have the Gnar ultimate coming out from GCU this game. Instead, it's Renekton. We can very much eviscerate one single target, but you can't lock down an entire team against the Cataclysm wall, very similarly to the way that they did in game number 1. You have the Janna Monsoon to kind of reposition the team fight. That's more survivability rather than murdering the enemy team.
Yeah, Janna, not the most murderous of supports in the league.
Depends. I've seen some very bloodthirsty Jannas, but this one going for the Ardent Sensor build. So Rikara, despite him being very far behind, has his 2 items right now. Static Shiv in addition to Infinity Edge, has the Ardent Sensor to help sustain him through team fights. Zig almost takes down that inner tower that we saw Ryu's Corki working on just about 5 or so minutes ago. So the teleports are now down on the bottom side of the map. Everybody else is on the top side of the map. Once again, fighting for vision control around the Baron Pit area.
Yeah, Solo made his way over there to lend an extra body to GCU as they try and get some vision down on the Baron. But as a result, that gave Zig some alone time down the bot lane to work that turret pretty low. Going to be able to grab that next time he gets a push out. But Infernal Dragon's coming up. We'll have to see how the teams approach this, because P1 obviously wanted for the team fight. GCU going to force get the flash out of Arrow right away. That's actually pretty big if there's another fight here in front of the Infernal Dragon. Yeah,
so that's going to be no summoner spell there for Arrow. They do end up burning the Ghost from Fly, but he still has his flash available as well as his Petrifying Gaze. Immediate start on the Infernal Dragon, though, by P1. GCU, though, they might be rotating up towards the Baron, but this is going down pretty quick. And P1, they've only had 2 members on the Infernal Dragon, so they're still going to be content to try to stop them from doing this Baron whatsoever. Solo was looking for a little slice and dice engage over the wall, but GCU, they get this one up. They can't really do anything in response.
I'm very surprised GCU went for that play. If you go for that Baron, you're basically telegraphing you're going for that Baron. You may as well leave those wards up if you want to go for that play and just brute force it down. You have the Tristana, you have the Cassiopeia, you have a Mountain Dragon. If you want to go for that because you think the Rek'Sai is down on Dragon, excuse me, then just force it and try and go for the Smite. As a result, they clear out 2 wards in trade for Infernal Dragon. I'd rather see them either take the fight or take the force. Instead, they took neither.
P1 is the ones that actually start brute forcing that Baron, but as soon as the Jarvan Demacian standard lands, they decide to back away as Zig is continuing to pressure down on this inner tier 2 tower on the bottom side of the map. It's a little bit of extra damage on it, but then has to back away as now Solo level 16 has level 3 Dominus, still only level 2 charge for Kled on Zig.
The level 16 Renekton power spike.
I mean, it's not necessarily a power spike, but at this point in time, he still has advantages over the Kled pickup that, you know, he had from the earlier stages of the game. It's continuing to force him away. It's not like the Kled can duel him straight up 1v1 right now.
No, but at the same time, he doesn't need to, because the 4-man core of P1 is doing a great job of smothering out GCU, and they've built up a 6,500 gold lead here. And at any point, you know, GCU will be forced into walking into the Baron. You'll have to be walking into Corki poke and Varus poke potentially if they're not actually on it. Or if they are, you just have to worry about how quickly they can do it. They have a pretty good team comp for being able to melt it down. Both Corki has huge damage generally, and Varus is no slouch either once he has his Blade of the Rune King.
Actually, speaking of Corki, over the wall with the package, not going to wind up trying to jump onto Santorin. Instead, just lets him flag and drag out of there. At this point in time in game number 1, which is very similar to this one, it was 2 kills to 1 in favor of P1. So they already have 1 less death. But it was about 27 minutes in when they took that first Baron and were able to push into and break the base of Gold Coin United. They still had to wait about 30 minutes after that before they actually wound up taking victory in that game. This time around, being a little bit more thorough and a little bit more careful about trying to take these objectives, and utilizing that Kled split push, and like you mentioned, utilizing the fact that their 4-man core is doing such a good job of basically battering and bruising GCU out of their own jungle, that even though the Kled is slightly behind the Renekton, it's getting advantages like almost taking out that tower on the bottom side.
And we see that Solo keeps making his way kind of towards mid lane, getting ready to come over and help his team if they need it. Zig matched him this time, but eventually Zig can probably just stay down the bot lane to finish that turret off. Got forced out. Both of them are playing a little bit of footsies around the river. As you see P1 just continue to push in, continue to vision control, and you can kind of feel the tension in this game out of both these teams, the nerves coming up here where neither team really wants to force too much. And they don't know exactly when's the right time to go, and when you add that pressure in that you're going to be put into the loser's bracket after this game, they end up a lot slower in their decision making.
See Santorin putting a second ward over the wall. It's MikeYeung and Ryu starting off on a bit of a duo Baron excursion, but it was snipped out very quickly by GCU. And actually Solo now, still in this mid lane. Zig has moved down to the bottom side of the map, so level 16 Kled rotation power spike takes down that tower.
Yeah, Arrowhead actually ulted Solo, I believe, and kept him in the mid lane. I don't know if that was intentional to prevent him from getting back bottom onto the turret to protect it, or if it was just, hey, maybe we can pick this guy. But either way, P1 is able to grab their 4th turret of the game, their first inner, as they continue to slowly try and grind out GCU, but the goal lead is mostly maintained at this point at around 6,500.
Interestingly enough, P1 is trying to out GCU in this game.
It's always risky to try and beat someone at their own game, and we see, you know, Rikara, despite those early game problems again that we were talking about all game 1, he's up to 300 CS, he's at 3 items, he's spiked pretty hard. There's some armor on the side of P1, but not a ton. As you see, Zig is basically just sitting on that Gargoyle Stone Plate. That's his only armor. So the Tristana will be doing just fine against that. A little bit more armor onto MikeYeung, but you're not particularly scared of a Rek'Sai. So the front lines are not too threatening this game on either side.
Not really. They're just kind of there to be big and beefy and make sure that nobody can get through to the squishy carries on the backside. However, Rikara does still have the aid of a Janna, so it has the shield coming out from that, and the Ardent Sensor proc that will follow. Duel of the Scuttle Crab actually goes in favor of Solo, so that's actually pretty huge. Infernal Drake will be the next one to spawn, but that Scuttle Crab will go away by the time that spawns.
and Baron's still available as well. Oh, we see the trigger being pulled by Zig here.
The Zig charge actually gonna lock down on the fly. He flashes over the wall, but he can't get away from the charge. He has to pop the Saracen Brace, but Zig finds a kill. That's gonna be P1 getting their 3rd kill of the game and opening up a potential Baron play for themselves.
Big mistake out of Fly there. You need to flash Kled ultimates as soon as you realize you are in line with them. There's no reason to wait till it tracks onto you, because then he gets followed over the wall. Fly's mechanical mistake there, or decision making to not just flash the red pit wall instantly, results in his death and potentially the Baron.
This is not a clean Baron though. Santorin's in the area, has the flag and drag available, no flash up. They lock down on the solo on the backside. He wants to flash away, but still goes down to Ryu. A 4th kill of the game picked up here by P1. Now they come back onto the Baron, which has regened up a little bit, about 5,000 HP. Is this going to be Santorin's time to shine? There's no wards in the pit right now, and Tristana actually has enough range to start taking pot shots at them over the wall if they so choose to. Ward in the pit doesn't see much, 2,000 HP. There's the Demacian standard. They're waiting for it to time out. P1 can sit here and play the patience game. Santorin goes in, but it's going to go over to Rikara. He crits and steals it with the vision from Santorin, and P1 lose Baron.
The auto attack range out of Tristana. I'm not sure if that was also a rapid fire cannon enhanced auto attack, but either way, he's able to get the Baron there when he combos with Santorin. Santorin didn't even get his smite off, I believe. It looks like it's still off cooldown, and off that, they're gonna be able to rotate down to the Elder Dragon, or the Infernal Dragon first as well. So they're gonna steal that one away. 2 objectives after losing 2 kills go in GCU's favor.
Man, and this is the Baron steal attempt coming out here from Santorin and the rest of GCU. They don't have vision on it when he goes over the wall either. He is the ward, literally this time, not just in dissenting TSM fans' way.
Yeah, it's just an auto attack, I believe, able to take that one away. I think it was a rapid fire cannon powered, because I didn't see him auto attacking much before then, but either way, huge play out of GCU there. P1 were trying to be as patient as possible around the Baron, but they make a mistake. GCU grabs the Baron, then they go for a reset, because obviously they're probably frustrated about the situation. GCU just runs down to Infernal Dragon, grabs that one as well. Now they're pressuring.
Well, there's a charge coming in from Kled. You said you can't out GCU, but this time they're trying to P1 it up, and they're locking down on the solo. Glacial Fissure rips across the entire GCU team. Solo's being chased up by Zig and Ryu, but at the same time, Arrow is dueling the front line. He takes down Santorin. They may have 3 Baron buffs left on them, but they still have no kills to their name, and P1 has 7.
GCU, despite the nice influx of neutral objectives, they're still down a heap of gold. They try and start sieging up with this Baron. P1 finally are able to find an opportunity to take an engagement. They find 2 kills onto the frontline members of GCU. Like we said, front-to-back team fighting out of both teams. P1 win with that gold advantage, and now they're going to keep pushing, trying to grab their first inhibitor turret.
Yeah, this is P1 now on the Baron-powered kill, trying to get the tower down here. Health bar still kind of low. Ryu actually takes a bit of tower shot damage, and Tristana damages one. Maybe getting a little bit too aggressive to try to finish off that tower. P1, though, they take the fight, and they wind up knocking that inhibitor tower down extremely low. So despite losing the Baron buff, they don't lose their composure. They still have about a 9,000 gold advantage in their favor, so they do have advantages.
They do have advantages. The game is starting to stall out a little bit. They did not actually take that mid inhibitor turret. That will start regenning up a little bit. It will be pretty trivial to knock down if they ever want to fight, but as long as it's still alive, it's a little bit more difficult for P1. And then at the same time, this is buying time for GCU a little bit. They were getting ground out slowly. They finally start finding some picks on P1's side. They go for the Baron, and that mistake, I'm sure this will probably be a negative power play for GCU overall, but they at least stopped P1 from getting it. Taking a look at this engage, you see just constant stuns up, going down to the front line here. Solo unable to move for a long period of time. Same thing kind of happened to Santorin there. He was tracked by the Kled ultimate. P1 splits up a little bit, focusing both frontline members down at the same time, and Fly and Rikara just not able to put out enough damage quite yet. Fly still looking for that Void Staff, doesn't quite have it yet. Sitting at about 3.5 items compared to the 4 on Corki.
In this deciding game 5, it's P1 that 7 kills to 0. They have yet to lose a tower. They've lost 2 dragons and technically lost a Baron. It's not like a no-hitter.
Yeah, technically, they were perfect gaming them before they kind of threw there. I mean, there was 1 Mountain Dragon taken away early by GCU, but other than that, I mean, it was a quote-unquote dominating performance by P1.
At this point in time, we have to make sure that P1 doesn't fall prey to the same tendencies they have in the LCS, which is they usually lose a Baron fight or get a Baron stolen away to get it maybe a little bit too desperate and try to overreach for something. They come out ahead in that team fight, so their gold lead at this point in time may just be enough to kind of shore up some of those weaknesses they have. They're able to keep Rikara out of these fights. He's 0-0-0, which is very weird to say. If they keep Rikara out of these fights, he won't be able to rip through them, but it's basically a full build Tristana at this point. Has a Doran's Blade in his last inventory slot, but is going to be able to be protected by the Janna and just sit there and rain pain down from the backsides of the line. If he gets a reset in a fight, it could be devastating, but P1 are knocking at the door of not just GCU's base, but of going into the winner's match of the promotion tournament tomorrow.
Getting these turrets down low, the bot inhibitor turret put down close to half, the mid sitting at about 10%, very close to being dropped down. As, hold on, Ryu gets jumped on a little bit here by a fly.
Petrifying Gaze is going to whiff right there, so that's a big ultimate down from the side of GCU, but also a big health bar down from the side of P1.
I'm a little surprised not to see Fly go a little more aggressive on that opportunity. He has Ghost and Flash available. The Valkyrie's out. Maybe you can chase with Ghost and try and burn him down slightly more, and you can hold your Flash and play it a little slower. Either way, it was a good chunk out, kind of forced them back out of that pushing position that P1 was in. Zig did move up to the top lane, built up a big wave up there, and he's going to try and force that turret down. And while people move up to that turret, P1 returns to the mid lane to force.
Chain of Corruption was forced out, and Rikara just jumped away, but now P1 are able to take down that tower. And as you mentioned, Mark, a slightly negative Baron power play for GCU, minus 657 is now P1. That's, you know, the Baron power play is over, so it's no longer a Baron power kill, but still just killing all the rest of the towers on the map. Now 7-0, matching their kill score. Symmetry.
That was actually some really nice play out of P1 there. Zig moves up to the top side to get that wave all the way in. As that's building, GCU sends Cassiopeia up there to try and get the gold on the most important member of their team, potentially at this point. And during that time, P1 recognizes that and brute forces down mid, Xpecial just runs forward. No creep wave to finish off that turret. GCU overreacts, trying to stop that. Top wave's vacated. Zig goes up there and finishes that turret off. So a really nice play to get those two turrets.
In the meantime, though, it has bought enough time and, more importantly, gold for Cassiopeia to finish the Void Staff. So almost full build Cassiopeia has one blasting one left in her inventory and enough room for some control ward.
Oh no, Tom, that's about 5,000 more gold that Cassiopeia can pick up in damage.
That's true.
She gets that 6-item slot.
First tower of the game has fallen in GCU's favor, however.
Fine.
That will be a little bit more gold going into the pockets of GCU, mainly Fly. In this instance, we were talking about him. But now this is kind of a situation very similar to game number 1. There's an Elder Dragon that's actually been started up by Ryu, who's over the wall and completely unseen, but Goldcoin United have to know something is up here because P1 are very vehemently defending against any sort of vision poking in from the side on the Elder Dragon. Ryu's gotten this down to about 3,000 HP, and MikeYeung is going to tunnel over the wall, smite that one away. P1 sneaked himself an Elder Dragon, and now, ooh! Corki Big One Rocket deals a ton of damage and applies the Elder Dragon burn, and GCU just have to turn tail and run.
P1 turning up the heat with these map plays right now. They get those two turrets, and then very impressively kind of posture more around mid lane and vision control with 4 while Ryu works array on that Baron. Oh. Now they're going to pull the trigger on and engage.
The Kled charge lands onto Solo. He pops his Dominus. Bear Trap on a rope is not going to pull him back in. Instead, they're trying to go into Santorin. He gets chunked out, but Fly's been chunked out as well. Arrow is going to be the one that gets the kill credit for the inhibitor, and P1 charge into the base of GCU.
Really nice plays out of Ryu. He's the one who's sneaking that Elder Dragon away. MikeYeung comes over for the smite. Zig speeds his whole team up to charge down onto that inhibitor. Ryu chunks out Fly to the point where they can't contest it at all. Now they're transitioning to a Baron. GCU is nowhere nearby. This is going to be another free objective for P1.
P1 get themselves a Baron, have the Elder Dragon ticking on them. 7 kills. 7 towers and an inhibitor dead in the mid lane. Things looking really good for them. Xpecial Glacial Fissures, but he's kind of all by himself. Does wind up eventually finding Arrow and MikeYeung, but Ryu's picked up his package, gone down the bot side. Zig is now up in the mid lane. So once again, the 1-3-1 split is now a 3-1-1 split, but P1 may have a different kind of team composition where it's still falling back to what they do best.
P1 setting up to end this game. One inhibitor already down. They have the Baron. Elder Dragon will time out relatively soon. About 2/3 of the way done with that one. And the turrets are still kind of low, I believe, from the chip damage that they were throwing in on that bot side. You see how much damage Ryu's doing right now.
Yeah, 2-0 and 5 on this Corki. Trinity Force, Infinity Edge, Blade of the Rune King, double Shiv items, or double Zeal items, the Rapid Fire Cannon, Static Shiv, and Sorcery Shoes, because 80% magic damage now. It's only going to amplify the effect of those static shiv crits as well. You can see that tower, like you mentioned, Mark, took a bit of punishment from before. It's about half HP. Now, way far below that is the poke, the prod, and the projectiles coming out from Phoenix1. Just about taking this one down with some help from their Baron buffed up cannon minion friend. They're going to wind up taking down the inhibitor tower on the bottom side, as well as this inhibitor. Just GCU can't pull the trigger. They don't want to fight into the dragon. They don't want to fight into P1.
They need to go at some point, though. They're going to lose their whole base. If they don't go here, they're going to lose triple inhibitors. And this is the kind of thing that GCU struggles at, just deciding to go, finding an opportunity.
Elder Dragon Burn has just fallen off, though, and the Santorin and Solar are going to try to fight this, and it could be the last fight of the game. A good lock up the Cataclysm. The Bass Bros are in the front line. The Monsoon for Janna's keeping them alive on the back. Flying Rikara on the opposite side, though, as Ryu picks up the first kill of the fight. Landed rockets on the back line. Now Solo has to turn tail and run. Rikara has to leap out, and this is Phoenix1 crushing through Goldcorn United in a Game 5. P1 will come out on top, 11 kills to 0, and they will win the series 3-2.
Phase 1 is complete for Phoenix1. They're going to move on to the winner's match tomorrow to take on the winner of the other streams series. And you see the relief on P1's faces. A very scary series, almost getting reverse swept. But GCU comes up short in Game 5.
Phoenix1 closed the door on what could potentially have been a reverse sweep from Goldcorn United, and they do it in a very impressive fashion. It took quite a while for them to actually find the fights to end the game, but 11 kills to 0. They gave up 1 tower compared to completely taking all 11 from the side of Goldcorn United. And more importantly, they showed that games 1 and 2, they had a very cohesive play style that they were playing with. Game 3 and 4, they went away from it. It didn't work out as well, but in Game 5, they adjusted ever so slightly and showed that they could play the game that GCU was trying to play.
I think that's the big thing, just for Phoenix1, the small adaptations made in the draft. GCU, while they're always getting better late game team comps, oftentimes they were losing matchups, and they fell behind multiple times. A couple times they came back and were able to win, but this time around, Phoenix1 made sure that not only do they still have these strong lane matchups, but they drafted a little bit better front line to protect their carries when they get these leads. And so Phoenix1's able to kind of close this game out. Still, like you said, a little gun shy at points, but once they made that first mistake around Baron, I think that was actually good for them in the sense that it freed their mentality up, because there's probably so much pressure of, oh, we got to do this right, we can't risk Baron, we can't possibly lose Baron. Well, you lost Baron, and you're still fine. You're still 7,000 gold ahead, and that's when you finally see that kind of baits GCU to walking forward, which enables Phoenix1 to find their engage, and then they smash that fight, and they're like, oh, wait, we're still way stronger, and then from there, they didn't need to look back ever.
Right, pretty much once they got them out in the open, they realized that they were still so far ahead. It was pretty much P1 kind of just like, oh, that's the go button. Like, we realized that we are this far ahead, and we can actually start taking these fights down. But more importantly, was also the fact that they didn't overreach for anything. We didn't necessarily see MikeYeung, who was very quiet once again in the earlier stages of this game, wasn't necessarily going for aggressive plays and trying to invade Santorin's jungle and basically like shut him out of the game like they did in Game 3 in the Jarvan versus Gragas one. This time around, he was more content to kind of just farm up his advantages and move around the map and kind of keep what was going well for P1 well.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing, is just how badly Arrow was winning laning phase. He smashed Game 1, he smashed Game 5, and what ended up happening for the first 20 minutes of this game is both junglers just went to wherever Arrow was, and Arrow was able to keep pushing in with the help of Xpecial, and they just slowly chipped turrets down, and eventually they started grabbing them, and it limited what Santorin could do. It might have limited a little bit about what MikeYeung wanted to do as well, but at the very least, it was still helping his team out, and they were able to grab a couple of objectives off of it.
And it worked a lot better when he was on the Rek'Sai pick, because all he kind of had to do was threaten the fact that he could, tunnel in and then burrow on somebody, and the fact that Arrow was that far ahead meant that they could pick up a kill. We even saw Ryu joining the fray on the bottom side of the map, forcing them away from that tower. Then he and MikeYeung went to the mid lane. The rest of GC was like, oh no, we need to defend Fly. He lost his flash. They lost the bottom tower off of the fact because, oh wait, you still have this very, very fed Varus. Yeah,
that's the thing, is that the carries were very strong. We were talking about, which one would you rather be a little bit here if you're Phoenix1 or GCU? Would you rather have a stronger Renekton or a stronger Varus? And I think, as you see, as the game goes longer and longer and longer, the Renekton's advantages become negligible at that point, because they're just going to bump into two front lines, and it's much better to have a back line that can melt faster. So even though, the backline should be better by champions for GCU, they were further behind in gold and could not match what the Corki was putting out.
All right, well, to hear a little bit more about that series from the player's perspective, we're going to head on to stage side where Avali May has an interview with the victorious top laner.
Thanks, guys. Great cast on the day. I am here with top laner Zig. Zig, what a back and forth series. It was so close for both teams. When you came in this weekend, was this the outcome that you expected?
Honestly, practice has been going pretty up and down lately, so I didn't really know what to expect coming into the match, but yeah, it was really hard fought, and it was super, super close in the end, and we almost got reverse swept, which would have felt really, really bad. But yeah, I didn't really know what to expect coming into today, and I'm really glad that we pulled out the win.
Well, you fought it off. You guys won 2 in the beginning, and then you lost 2, and then you pulled it out. What goes through your team's heads coming back from a loss and trying to pull out that win?
Honestly, morale was pretty weakened, I guess, but you just have to play it out. I mean, we can't just go home like 2-2 or something like that. So yeah, we try to focus extra hard for the last game, and we just pulled it through. I mean, we didn't really do anything special, but the thought of getting reverse swept was definitely on our minds. So.
Well, you're not done with this weekend yet. Tomorrow you play Team Liquid. Do you have any thoughts on that matchup?
Actually, I didn't see how that went yet. So I guess when we go home, we'll have to watch their games. And I think we're 0-4 with them over the season. So we're gonna try to prepare our hardest and do everything we can and give it our all tomorrow.
Sorry about that. I should have spoiler alerted that, but congratulations on the win. I wish you the best of luck tomorrow. And to break down those games, we're gonna go shoot it over to our analyst desk.
Thank you very much, Avali, and it does look like Phoenix1 gonna get to go home and have dinner after pulling out the series.
What kind of dinner?
Get
though?
to eat.
Real question.
Chicken dinner, whatever. Zig and the team were able to pull it out. They didn't want to leave after 2-2, and they found themselves the win.
Yeah, and as you can see, morale was pretty low, but they have to remember they are professionals. They play this game for a reason, and they were the LCS team that we expected to win, right? You're almost always favoring the LCS teams in this matchup, and if Ryu is on Corki, it seemed like they were able to find success. Outside of that, though, you can still see plenty of holes in both of these teams.
Yeah, 3-0 was Ryu on Corki, but looking, again, another late scaling comp for Goldcoin United. That's exactly what you prescribed when we looked back in Game 1. And it did look like we were getting to the point where they were going to be able to pop up, and they weren't able to find it.
Yeah, I mean, the game plan stays the same, right? Cassiopeia, Tristana, even though on the top side, they're going to draft something a bit earlier like Renekton so they don't have a bunch of, losing lanes where MikeYeung's going to come in and, counter jungle, which has been a problem. Even with the amount of kills that they're giving over and the gold lead and all the towers that are going down, you're like, that Tristana and Cassiopeia, there is a chance for that late game team fight to go that way.
Yeah, unfortunately, they had 0 kills.
Yeah.
They went a little too hard in the scaling strategy. They were unable to make a single play on a champion. They got the 1 Baron steal, which we thought maybe would be clutch, but it took them too long to try and scale up, and they gave away too many small advantages throughout the game.
Right, one of the advantages that they did give them was the Baron, and when we look back at this play here at 33 minutes, it does look like it's gonna go to P1. P1's in control, but just take a look at this, and we get to see how cool, calm, and collected Goldcoin United is, and Rikara is specifically with his 2-step right here.
Yeah, he saves up his rapid-fire cannon, and Santorin leaves the flag for the last second, so they're hoping to even burst it from 2K. But Mike smites it 1,300, and then the auto attack gets it from Rikara. So Santorin pretty much just gave vision and threat. I think what happened there is Mike assumed the smite would happen immediately after Santorin flagged in, so he was trying to counter smite it. But overall, it was a bad smite by MikeYeung.
Yeah, I mean, we don't know what the team communication was like. Right. Maybe it was like, we're bursting now or whatever. But there are a couple of things that you can point to, right? Braum, Xpecial, the Unbreakable, that's going to block any projectiles. So he has it up, and they wait till it goes down, then Jarvan jumps in, and he gets the Tristana shot over. If Phoenix1, with the Braum Unbreakable up, have Xpecial move to the back of the Baron pit to block any other projectiles, then at least you increase your chances, right? Then you only have to worry about the Jarvan who's coming in with his smite, and you've got 4 people there who can theoretically help out the jungler as well. But, I mean, sometimes the high-pressure situations just kind of roll that way. And, yes, you can look back on it and improve, but that is tough.
They won.
They won in the end.
It's
definitely some improvements to take away, though.
Yeah, Baron was not the reason why either of these teams won, as they both went to both sides. But as we wrap up this series, we'd like to recognize one player who stood above the rest, and today it's Ryu, who ends as the player of the series. Honorable mention, though, to Arrow for doing a pretty good job, but take a look at those numbers. When he had Corki, he popped off and did exactly what his team needed.
Yeah, you can look at those damage numbers. Corki does a lot of damage, not that much on the average, so pretty much the carry there. You can see why they're willing to first pick it in the decisive game 5. Arrow did have a lot of lane control, and that did enable Ryu to make the big plays in team fights, but Penta kill in game 2 and a carry performance there in game 5.
Yeah, that was the only other thing I was going to say is Arrow also had a really good series. For the majority of it, the counterpart carry basically, but Ryu, as you can see, pretty big highlight reel here. Plus he got that Penta. I'm feeling good about the late game as well. Team fights. This one where he chases off Fly and is able to get the kill on the outside as well.
Yeah.
This absolutely good performance from him on the champion.
Yeah, he did great. And as we close out our day, let's take a look at how the bracket shaked out. In day 1, the LCS teams have come out on top and will face off in the winners match on NALCS 1, while the challenger squads, Goldcorn and United and E-United, the Uniteds, look to regroup in their match tomorrow in NALCS 2. And it looks like only one of the challenger teams will have another shot against one of the LCS teams.
Yeah, and we heard Zig right there say they struggled against Team Liquid during the regular season, so especially knowing that Team Liquid was more than twice as fast at dispatching their challenger opponent today, they're going to be so confident going into that one.
Team Liquid looked like the only, confident team coming out of today. Even though Phoenix1 did win their series, it was a long slug, so definitely understandable that they're feeling a little bit risky about their matchup with Team Liquid. The other thing, though, is that, talking about the challenger teams fighting for another chance, those Team Liquid games, they lost in under 30 minutes for every single game. So not even sure, how confident they're going to be coming into their game, even with Goldcoin.
Right.
We've already seen a best of 5 between those two teams. Goldcoin did win 3-1, so I wouldn't be too surprised if we see a rematch of this series we just saw on Sunday for the final win.
Right, because Liquid did look great, and as you pointed out, in those games in the LCS when Liquid played Phoenix1, those were both games that we all looked at as analysts, as you guys looked at as analysts, as games that we thought Phoenix1 could win. I think the first time was when they first picked up MikeYeung, and then they fell flat 0-2, and then the second one was like, hey, this is your chance to save your LCS season, save your World Championship points, get the win. And I believe they lost 2-0 to that one as well.
Yeah.
On the opposite,
a lot of it is about resetting expectations. Phoenix1 has had really high expectations because as soon as they do something good,
Riff Rivals, woo!
Yeah, all right. But it's they're almost becoming the new false hope team because they win 4 games against Europe. They win 1 other series throughout this. They go up 2-0 in this series. They nearly get reverse swept. So they, I think, are appropriate with their expectations now because they've had to stumble and they're on their way back to recovery.
All right, well, with that, that's going to do it here with us, from us. So, on behalf of myself, the casters, and the entire live broadcast crew, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you tomorrow for more league action.